Mm. All right. Hello, there, everyone. This is Mr. Brass, and this is another episode of the Brass Exchange. And with me is a men's rights activist, and she's well known and infamous around the circles in the men's rights community. This is Laura Brooks.
Hello, hello. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. I could be better, but I'm not going to complain because nobody would care anyway.
Yeah. Um. Tell the audience about yourself.
Oh wow. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but so I guess what's most important is you know my men's rights like history. But so I'm I'll go back a little bit. I'm one of two kids, right? The youngest child. My mother is white, my father's black. So I have that biracial history in my background anyway.
So you're a
Um,
penguin.
I am. Um, and so, like the race thing really just never sat well with me because, there's 8 kids on both of my parents' side. There's a
Mhm,
huge family. You know what I
mhm,
mean? How am I supposed to choose one from the other? And
mhm,
so I think that kind of cemented my the way that I think because I look at the same way when I look at issues when it comes to men's rights.
mhm,
Men and women are, if we're claiming that we're equal, then it should be on the same level playing field. You know what I mean? But anyway, so I started hanging out with the honey badgers way back in 2014.
mhm,
Um, that was kind of when the hashtag Women Against Feminism was exploding, and there was Janet Bloomfield, and she was just making some awesome tweets, and I would piggyback off of her, and so she asked me if I wanted to be a little bit more involved, and I said, yeah, I'm really with this thing, right? So I
mhm.
did, and I never looked back. Like I started doing work with Paul Elam on one of the ICMI's, ICMI 15, but I was doing like
Mhm.
background stuff. And from there, I got known, or got introduced to Allison and Hannah and Karen and just all of the people in this movement. I mean, there's so many amazing voices, and so yeah, that's kind of was my beginning into this thing that we do. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, and I've been with it ever since. So about 4 years ago is when I started doing the Thursday show with Hannah, and that's been every week. It's kind of hard to think that it's been that long so far, but yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Um,
been really.
I remember, I actually I've talked to both Paul Elam and Hannah, and they were some of the best shows I had. I'll admit. Like for people that want to know my history on it is, I mean, I believe the first time I was ever introduced to the concept of men's rights was, I believe, in high school, like when I was just like a freshman.
Mhm.
And I had heard about feminism. And, me being the autistic guy I am, I like to figure out, like, whenever I hear a concept, I like to think of its opposite. And so I looked up online and I was saying, like, what was the opposite of feminism? And I got things like masculinism, and I just followed that path on Google for a while, and I ended up finding Warren Farrell.
Yeah, Warren
And
Pale was amazing. I love his work.
yeah, I found him, and I really didn't think about it that much. I'd actually brought it up with one of my teachers, and I didn't think about it back then as she said it to me when I brought it up to her. Um, but I've come to now realize that there was probably a dark agenda when what she said. She responded back to me. Um, basically, I remember I'd said, "Oh, well, you know, women are feminists," and I would say, and I told her, "Well, I call myself a masculinist," and she said, "Well, you're I mean, what do you feel like?" Like she said something along the lines of, "How would you feel like you're oppressed? You're a man."
Hmm.
And at the time, I didn't think really anything of that. And I sort of didn't get into it again until like years later. Eventually, I had just by sheer coincidence ran into a guy named Dean Esme.
Yes.
Yeah, I ran into him and I actually worked with him on a project where we talked about basically religion and politics.
Hmm.
And eventually that spiraled out of control into a trash heap, and I eventually left that.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's a little bit of a sad story. Sorry not to cut into your story, but
yeah,
it's a bit of a sad story. Dean was another one of the first people who I got to know in this movement, and yeah, he I think he just spiraled into the more religious side of things and just kind of turned people off.
mm,
But I mean, he's got a great mind, that can't be taken away from him. Anyway, sorry, go on.
yeah. So once I got out of that, I mean, so once I got out of him, I was just introduced into the men's rights from him. And, I didn't even know Hannah had a Twitter until like just recently. So I followed
Really?
her and I started just, I would see her in a thread and I would just go through it and I would respond to like what people she was fighting in the thread were saying. And I was like, a lot of these people that she's responding to are idiots.
Yeah. I, I I don't know where she finds the tenacity. I really don't, because she has threads that go on for literally for months. For
Mhm,
months. I don't know how she finds the patience. I mean, I guess it's easy. At a certain point, it just becomes like, you're swatting flies,
mhm.
but gosh, she has patience, a level of patience that I just don't. Not
I-
anymore, not anymore, not like I used to.
mm. Well, I mean, with me, I mean, I couldn't do that for all those months either. And I'm a pretty, like, if anyone knows my character on Twitter, I've actually even had it on my profile where I say I'm an experienced troll. And the people that I love making fun of the most are people that take themselves too seriously.
Yeah, there's
And
plenty of them.
feminists have gotten me. I've gotten some great content out of feminists trolling them.
Yeah. Oh no, it's so much fun because it's so easy,
Mm,
After a while, it's just like they all read out of the same playbook.
mhm,
It's just it becomes so. There's still people to this day talking about the wage gap. Like
mm,
how many times has that been debunked? But they just don't know. They don't have that knowledge. So, I guess in a sense, it's kind of educational for their purpose, if they're willing to accept and take in the information, which a lot of them don't. But I think what happens online is that well, if you're smart about it, you don't argue with the people for their sake. You argue for the audience's sake so that they can see what's going on and they can make up their own mind.
yeah,
You because some people, you're just never going to change their minds, right? It's just a fact of life.
yeah.
Um,
I remember, with I remember with that is like that's a sort of a lawyer tactic that I've noticed.
mhm.
And because a lawyer has no job, like if you're a prosecutor, A prosecutor doesn't have a job to convince the defense that
Right.
the person is guilty. They have to convince the third parties, i.e., the judge and the jury. Whether or not the defense is convinced at all is irrelevant.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how I sort of see it with the feminists. Like, it's irrelevant to me whether or not a feminist actually can actually understand the arguments.
Mhm.
I care more about the people that may be on the edge of either side and can actually see me bulldozing through them.
Right.
Mhm,
Right. And it's effective. If social media does anything, it does reach people. A lot of it is just vapid, narcissism. I'm going to post, here's my new profile pic.
mhm,
It's just attention seeking, but at the same time, if you have a message that you want to get across,
mhm,
yeah, it's good to get that attention, and it's useful. I think it just, with the cancel culture, I think it just makes it a lot more difficult to navigate than should be necessary. You know what I mean? Because I know it's the Ben Shapiro quote, but facts don't care about your feelings.
mhm.
But that's not how people react to it. They hear something that goes against everything that they believe, and it's, oh my God, I want to tear your entire life down. We've stopped treating each other as humans. It's sad. It's really sad to see. Um, but yeah, here we are,
I mean,
right?
I believe, this is just my speculation, but I think once people got away from religion in America, they didn't really get away from religion. They just picked a new one, which was just politics.
Yeah, yeah.
Which, in my opinion, I prefer people being religious. Seriously, politics has, I mean, if we're going to talk about the death toll, there's nothing that beats politics.
Yeah, yes, I would agree with that. I mean, now I'm sure there are going to be people who are going to say, "Oh my God, what about all the religious wars that were started?" Um, but I think the deaths that come from political manipulation are just evil. I mean, just
Mm,
way more evil. You know what I mean? It's just nefarious. You're just wasting human life
mm,
for the benefit of small handful of people, and who will never get held to account for anything that they do.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
I mean,
and what's
at least like religious wars, there's some kind of piety, like there's some kind, you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
there's a reason, there's a higher reasoning to them. It
Well, I
may,
mean, what I say is that in a religious war, at least both parties really consider themselves to be a power above them. Whereas in purely political wars, usually the politicians do not believe that.
yeah, they think they're the god.
Yeah.
That's
So, and to me, that scares me a lot worse.
yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot more politicians than there are gods. So
Yeah. And it always just, it always like got to me is like people will often get on me about my opinion on when it comes to voting.
mm,
And it's funny because I actually use liberal arguments against guns for the voting. Um, because what's a typical argument that a liberal will give for gun control? Well, it's the typical, oh, look at the cars argument. We have all these steps in order for you to get a car. Um, and so why don't we have that for guns? And I say, well, why don't we have that for voting?
well, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, and it's so much less of an invasive process to have an ID to vote. I mean, and people are completely unrealistic about what it takes to actually purchase a gun. You go through a vigorous background check. They're not just putting hands into every civilian, who sign, comes up to your doorstep. That's not how it works. Now, the real problem is the illegal guns that get in. Those are the criminals, right? Those are the people who are getting these guns and doing the bad things with them. They're the ones killing people. It's not your law abiding citizen, which are most of us.
Yeah.
And it's just
But
political.
don't you know, Lauren, that all the problems come from toxic masculinity?
Of course they do. Of course they do. We live in a patriarchy. Oh my goodness. It really, oh my God, again, it's draining. And so what I'm coming to now is this idea that I would like to get away from the idea of labeling feminists as like the boogeyman, right? Because you don't just have to identify yourself as a feminist to espouse these hateful ideas, and I
Yeah.
think we let a lot of women off the hook just because they don't call themselves a feminist. They may say something that sounds like it's cheerleading for men, but then they'll go on to say something completely hateful and, oh my God, this guy looked at me a certain way. You know what I mean? They still hold the ideas. So when I think about feminism, I know what it is. I know it's a system. I know where it came from. I know, how it's affected this society. Um, but I think it's gotten to a point where it has been so effective that there are women, men and women, walking around with these ideas just naturally ingrained into
Mhm.
them. So it doesn't matter if they identify as it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right, because I remember, I had to, like I believe most people they go through, at least most men in America go like for my case, I went through the simp phase, and I eventually became red pilled. Uh, and I think it is sort of it takes a while to truly detox from everything you heard. And a big thing that got me red pilled was that when it came to matters of
Mm.
sexual abuse and domestic violence, because that's a big thing both MRAs and feminists fight over.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
And
Um,
mm, and I loved how Karen had brought it like more to the front in many cases because I liked her strategy over the feminist strategy because as someone that was sexually abused myself, you know, it felt like I was also sexually abused by a woman, and it sort of felt like with Karen, I felt actually more powerful because beforehand I had taken the feminist sort of way of dealing with it, where I just seen myself as a victim, incapable of doing anything about the situation, and I had to blame other people. But once I actually left that and I got into the men's rights, I actually felt more empowered because I said, there were a lot of red flags that went on in my life at that time. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean I deserved what happened to me. Nor do I think anyone that gets sexually abused and misses those red flags deserved it to happen to them. But it does let you know that, yeah, you can take precautions
mhm,
and you can try to minimize your risk. And
right.
to me, that's a lot more powerful. And I don't know why a movement that proclaims to be for empowering women will give them a mindset where they're always going to feel inferior and less powerful.
Well, because empowerment is not actually their goal. You know,
Mhm,
they want women to be dependent. They want women to feel like they need this group, this community. Oh, I'm a feminist. And so I belong somewhere. I mean something because I have these moral values that are superior to yours. And if you're not a feminist, oh my goodness, well, you've just been doing life wrong. And you know, it's it's enticing if to a mind to a weak-minded person that feels the need for acceptance,
mhm,
you know. And to your point, I about like the sexual abuse thing, and I'm sorry that that happened to you. That's
mhm,
horrific. I hate hearing it anytime that it
mhm,
happens because I couldn't imagine, you know, having to deal with that.
mhm,
But it's I think blame is useful. You know, it's
mhm,
important to identify the source of the problem, right?
mhm,
It's when you live with that and when you
mhm,
can't let it go, that's when it becomes a problem. You know, when you can just say, look, this is what happened to me, and I'm going to choose to move on from it, whether or not you actually, you know, confront that person or get justice for what happened. It's healing for you to be able to, you know, move on from that and do better, you know. And you have to kind of let go sometimes, because if you're constantly angry and you're constantly holding on to that pain, it's just going to fester inside of you, and what good does that do anybody? It doesn't do you any good, you know.
mhm,
So I think forgiveness. Look, I don't know if I could forgive a person that did anything like that to me.
mhm,
But at some point, you kind of have to allow yourself to move on, and the only way to do that, even if the anger is still there, you kind of have to, for your own sake, put it to the side and say, I'm not going to let this dictate the way I live the rest of my
mhm,
life. So, kudos to you, man.
mhm,
It's always a great thing to see somebody come out on the other side of it, and
mhm,
you know that it's. I know it's probably a something that you have to deal with a lot, you know,
mhm.
but yeah, good on you, man.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like it wasn't just that I was sexually abused, it was also the fact that it was a woman that did it.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that women who get sexually abused by a man, it's a great experience. Obviously, it isn't. But I think that when it comes to men, I've given this some thought. It's actually a bit worse when it's a woman on a man, because when a woman isn't believed when she legitimately was, sexually abused by a man, people that tend not to believe her because not because they believe it's impossible for it to have happened, but because they believe that the person she's accusing of it is just too moral of a person to do it. That tends to be what it is. It's like a teacher that has a great record and or a loving father or something like that. People can wrap their mind around the possibility that the person did it. They just can't see more how that person morally could have done it. Whereas with men, it's both the fact that people, um, it's the same fact, like maybe it's a female teacher with a great record, and it's that plus people just say, well, it's impossible for a woman to sexually assault a man.
Yeah, well, you know, we see women as the nurturers, right?
Mhm,
They're the mothers. They're the that's your sister. It's just a
mhm,
little girl, right? It's coming from a place that's so unexpected that,
mhm,
yeah, I would think that alone would be enough of a traumatizing
mhm.
thing. and especially you don't think that it can happen to you
Mhm,
until it does. And especially if it's by someone that you trust or that you would feel comfortable around.
mhm,
And it's horrible. It's just horrible what people can do to each other, especially to little kids. And I think it's a little bit even more egregious when women do it to children because of the attitude that society has around them being the nurturers and the mothers and the caregivers, right? It's just a little bit more nebulous, like because then as a child, how would you feel like anyone's gonna believe you?
mhm.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
and
sad.
yeah, it really is difficult when it comes to men being abused, and it's not. I mean, because I like to bring up this fact with feminists because I don't think they can really give an answer to it. If we live in a patriarchy that benefits men at the expense of women, why is it that men are less likely to come out with a rape accusation than women are?
Right, right. No, because it's not true, number one.
Mm, mhm,
And again, it's the narrative. They have to keep that narrative alive
mhm,
so that they can maintain their position,
mhm,
right? If men are constantly getting this messaging, well, men never talk about their feelings. Well, then where are they supposed to go? They don't even know where to go,
mhm,
and I see it a lot on social media, like, and it really breaks my heart. Like, there's guys that genuinely don't feel like there's anyone out there that cares about them, that who
mhm,
will listen to them. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't mean I have to step into your life and try to save you from your circumstances, but having someone to talk to is necessary. And I think especially in these last 2 years with COVID, I think a lot of people are learning that now. This isolation is not healthy,
mhm,
and just having someone to talk to can be so beneficial. But I see a lot of guys just they just don't feel like women care,
mhm,
and to be fair, a lot of women don't. A lot of women
mhm,
just care about themselves, and I just want more people to know that there are people, men and women, out here having these conversations. And, you don't have to feel alone. There's places you can go, there's people you
mhm.
can talk to, you know?
With many men, they're afraid of showing weakness even to other women because they're afraid that if they open up, it's going to be used against them.
Yeah. Well, that's true,
Mm,
because it, and it sucks because if you don't know the person that you're confiding in, if you don't really know how they feel about men's rights and the men's issues as a whole, uh yeah, if you open up to them about something that happened to it, be it sexual abuse or a child custody situation, um it can be very daunting. Like, you don't know where this person stands, and so you're trying to describe the things that are happening, and a lot of times people will come back at you with they try to blame you, try to find fault with what you did, and
mm,
who wants to listen to that? You want an open ear, you want someone who's just going to listen and not judge you. So yeah, it's difficult to find
mm,
people in your life like that, but you know in
mhm,
the men's rights movement, in the manosphere, whatever you want to call it, there are
mhm.
plenty of people here, you know.
I've
So
noticed a common phrase that people that it used to mean something very specific, but now it's just more thrown around as an insult, and that's incel. Um, I mean, for one, I actually doubt the actual existence of incel in a way because any man with $100 in his pocket can get a woman.
Absolutely. I mean,
Mhm.
look, sex is easy enough to get. I have a real big problem with the whole way incels are stereotyped and stigmatized. Um, what I find to be the case is that these are people who just for through no fault of their own, there's just circumstances of their birth, right? Maybe they have a mental disability or a physical disability. They're just not able to find a suitor, right? There's n- there's nothing wrong with that. It's not like it shouldn't be some kind of diagnosis that means that they're unfit for life. It just means that there's no women out there willing to sleep with them. Or I'll take the spending money on a female attention aside, because if it was just about sex, then of course, yeah, they can do that. I think what a lot of these people want is they want an actual relationship. They want affection from a woman. They want to feel loved, and we just bash these guys like, oh my God, you just can't get laid. It's no, that's not what it is. And stop diminishing these people's experiences by just saying that they're unlucky in love. So, they're just what, unworthy of, I don't know, human decency. I don't think
Well,
so. And it just, I'm sorry, it really bothers me because I know some of these guys. And
mhm,
there's absolutely nothing wrong with them per se, but that's how the label is what deems them unfit. And
mhm.
I don't like that.
And what's funny about it all is that, like, even with people that don't call themselves feminists, but they call themselves traditionalists, which I honestly see that there are many traditionalists that are indistinguishable from feminists and how they talk.
Hmm.
Um, like especially for the like when it comes to issues like prostitution, and it's always looked at through the lens of, well, look at how everything is dangerous for women in it. And I'm like, do you ever think like in it's all and I remember in some Swedish cultures, I believe, it's legal for a woman to sell sex to a man, but it's illegal for a man to buy sex.
Right.
Which to me, that's like saying, well, it's legal for a drug dealer to sell you drugs, but it's illegal for you to buy the drugs.
Yeah. It makes absolutely no sense.
Mhm,
Um, but again, look at who the demographic is who
mhm,
gets charged for these crimes.
mhm,
Men. You
mhm,
know, you don't see women getting hauled off to jail for soliciting, someone for sex. It
mhm.
just it. I'm sure maybe somewhere it has happened. I'll throw that one mulligan on the table, but it's a trap to get men to be fined or go to jail. The litany of any excuse they can get to charge a guy and you know what I mean, just vilify him. But it's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous because you can be in a relationship with a woman, quote unquote, this is my girlfriend, and she requires that you spend all of your money on her. She pays for nothing, and that's not seen. You're exchanging what for what? It's just a longer drawn out process, and she's taking more of your money,
Well, I mean, it's sort
that
of like this joke that I have, like, what's the difference between a prostitute and a wife? Prostitutes get a wage, a wife gets a salary.
that's true. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Another one is like another difference between the two is if you actually give a prostitute money, you'll actually get sex.
Yeah, well, there's that, and then
Mm,
don't pay the prostitute for sex, you pay her to go away.
yeah,
Oh,
mm,
man. But
yeah,
yeah, no, I again, it's all about the safety of women, and meanwhile, if you're a guy and you get caught trying to get some sex from one of these workers, right? What worker has their clientele hauled off to jail? It's so stupid. It's so stupid. I mean, it should just be legalized, honestly. It's the government trying to get in the way in between men and women so
mm.
that they can just use one against the other. Oh, I'm sick of it.
Well, I mean, it's always given like from the empathetic side of the woman going through it, but they never bother to even investigate why men do it to begin with.
Right, right,
Like, for example, they never realize like many men that are in that situation, like where they get a prostitute, it's because a lot of times they're in a sexless and loveless marriage where they
mhm,
have not had any contact with women,
right,
and they they go and see a prostitute because they want to actually feel something with
right.
another person. It's not even about the sex necessarily, it's just to have someone.
Yeah, and I think one of the most egregious things is like, we're talking about all of these poor women, these poor women. Do they realize the power that they have? You know what I
Mhm,
mean? You have men who just want a piece of your attention. They just want a little bit of your time and they're willing to spend money on it. That's an incredibly powerful thing. But it's just being dismissed as, oh, well, she's just a sex worker. So, she's just a prostitute. And they demean it as if it means nothing. But then also, like, again, it just goes into this whole idea that women are weak. We have no power. There's nothing that we can do to. All we can. You just want us in the kitchen and having babies. No, you have an immense amount of power as a woman.
mhm,
You can make guys do do almost anything.
mhm,
I just don't understand why you wouldn't. Well, I mean, I guess I do understand why they won't
mhm,
acknowledge it, is because once you acknowledge it, then you have to acknowledge that there's responsibilities behind that, right?
mhm.
Which they'll never do.
Yeah, I made a joke also about this is the history of innovation in society. Basically, like, think about like the washing machine. Think about it like this. A guy, he's hearing his wife complain and saying, how stressful it is for her to have to wring out the clothes and do that. And the guy's saying, well, what do you want me to do about it? He says, well, if you came up with something, I could wear that favorite lingerie that you want more often. And the guy said, all right, well, time to build a laundry machine.
Yeah, right, right. All of the modern day conveniences that women have, we have because we fucking nagged men to death until they actually went out and created these inventions. The washing machine, the dishwasher, the vacuum cleaner, and they still complain about how much time it takes to do housework and who does more housework. Is it the man or the woman? Well, and these are even women who don't go out and work. They'll still complain about how much time it takes to do the housework. You're at home all day.
Mhm,
And I'm sorry that this claim about unpaid work. Well, if your rent is being paid, your bills are being paid, your food is being provided for, your clothing is being provided for, you have kids, the, all of your expenses for your children are being paid for. but you're mad because you have to clean up and do dishes and cook food and you're talking about unpaid work. No, you are being compensated by that man that you married. You know, if you married him, if you would.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm just waiting. And it's also funny because people never, people seem to believe that politicians are really any different than business owners in many ways. Because I usually see it like this: the difference between a business owner and a politician is simply the color of the paper they're going after. For for business people, they like that green paper. With politicians, they like the white paper, the votes.
mhm.
Both of them will go to any length, whether it be legitimate or illegitimate, to get those papers.
Yep.
And people never connect why politicians do the things that they do.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like people will make up all these great sounding things about why the Democrats want, open borders or want more immigrants to come into the country. They think, oh well, it's because of the land of the free, we're the land of the free, and that they'll give all these epithets. No, the reason why is because they want to outsource reproduction to these people.
Mm,
The people in this country aren't having babies, so their idea is, well, if we can't get our own people here to have babies in order to pay for all this welfare and stuff that we have, let's just immigrate people that already are having lots of babies, and they'll solve that for us.
yeah. See, I think one of the problems with that plan, though, is that I'm hearing stories that some of the places where they're sending a lot of these, it's a good way to illegal, undocumented immigrants,
Mhm.
migrants, they're sending them to these places and there's no work for them. Well, the government is not going to pay for you to live. That's not what this deal is. And so now these people have no money to pay back the coyotes who got them over the border in the first place.
Mhm.
So it's it's going to detonate very badly, I think. Um, I would say if you're in a major city, get away from it if you can, because that's where they're sending these people
Mhm.
to. They're very near to major cities, so like New York City,
Mhm.
not the place to be, you know. And it's just sad. Like they're coming here because they say, "Oh well, oh the border's open now." But Biden said we can come. Okay,
Mhm.
well then you get here and did you think about what was going to happen after that?
Mhm.
No, they took advantage of these people for their own benefit.
Mhm.
And there's no guarantee that that it's going to be the boon that they wanted. And
Well,
you know, this year's election, the midterms are coming up. And I don't think that all of these people that they're draining into this country are going to be enough to turn the tide.
mm, yeah,
Yeah, it's going to be a bloodbath.
I think so too, and it's just funny to me how like another thing like you touched on before when it came to voter ID. A lot of people on the side that want to not have voter ID, I mean, they used all the words of systemic racism and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I point out, look, objectively speaking, the Democrats do not care about the races. That well, here's what the only reason why Democrats even bring up and care about the issue is because they're worried if they have voter ID, then that's going to stop people from voting for them.
Yes. And we've got what, 2 more years of this?
Mhm,
I'm not a happy camper,
mhm,
but we'll see what happens. I don't
mhm,
know. I don't know if our I don't know if the orange man is gonna go again. I'm sure
mhm,
he wants to.
mhm,
I don't know if there's gonna be anyone that the RNC could put up against him. Um, I'm seeing a couple of missteps from Trump, but as far as I'm concerned, there really is no other option. I'm not
mhm,
seeing one on any side. I'm not seeing a presidential candidate coming
mhm.
from anywhere. So people are going to have to. I think it might take the next 2 years for the rest of the normies to finally come on board
Mhm.
and realize that this was a mistake.
Um, but I believe also is that there is, well, I mean, since you're half black and you're half white, I always found that funny because I've always made this joke. If Obama would have ran as a Republican and he would have won as a Republican, the fact that, it would have never been brought up that he was black. They would have said that they would have focused on the fact that his mom is white,
Hmm.
and they would have said he's the first mixed race president.
That I think I agree with where you're going with that. However, I think the fact that he is a he
Mhm,
and not a she is
mhm,
the only reason that they didn't do that because um I mean look at what's going on right now, right? So
mhm,
Joe Biden wants to support or nominate this black female to the Supreme Court.
mhm,
It's not about politics. It's not about anything that she's done. It's about the color of her skin and what's going on between her legs. That's the
mhm.
only thing that matters. When people can be used for as political pawns, that's exactly what they do.
Yeah.
Um,
And, and before people get on me, because a typical thing that whenever you bring up affirmative action and stuff like that, they'll say, so what you're saying is that the people that are brought in from affirmative action are stupid, or they're not, they don't deserve it. And I say, no, that's not, it could be the case
mhm.
that they're the best qualified people to do the job. The problem is, even if they were the most qualified people for the job, the process of how they got there is not legitimate.
Exactly. Exactly. You know,
Mhm.
nobody's
I
saying
mean,
that.
because let's think about it this way. Imagine, let's say, for example, this was in the 1800s, and I became a professor of a school. And, I thought I got the job because I thought, oh, I'm a brilliant person. I was obviously the most qualified. And they said, oh, no, we didn't hire you because of your skills. We hired you because you're white.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I would feel horrible about that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Absolutely, and you
mhm,
want to feel like if you do the work that you're being recognized for the work that you do, not just because I came out of the womb this way.
mhm,
It's this unearned privilege that
mhm,
gives everybody a bad taste in their mouth, and rightfully so.
mhm,
Because if what they claim is that that's exactly what happens on the reverse, right? You have white privilege. Oh, there's all this white privilege. Um, okay, well, how is it white privilege if a white student who is equally as good or better than another student that is of a different color, that student gets picked? That's not white privilege, but they claim that these two things exist at the same time, right? Like there's this need for affirmative action. I'm sorry. I don't. the need to use my identity to get me into a better position in life.
Mhm.
I am in the place in my career where I am because I do the work, right? I've
Mhm.
studied, I've done this for the past 2 decades, right? Like I know what I know, and I'm good. I show up. I have work ethic, right?
Mhm.
The color of my skin should not be the thing that gets me in the door. Um,
And
but yeah,
a
no.
lot of the times they bring up a lot of bad history when it comes to it, and they make generalizations about black people.
Hmm.
I mean, I like to tell, like, when people said, like, I've heard many black people that say, well, my ancestors were slaves. And I'm like, how do you know that?
Right.
Because, uh, because let's think about it this way: there are more black people that have come to this country, you know, legally come to this country today than were ever shipped here from slavery.
Well, yeah. See, oh man, now this is a whole other conversation. Because I fully believe, I know it for a fact that we have not been taught the real story about slavery, right? I really don't believe in racism. I don't believe in it as an ideology. I know that it exists, right? There are people who are racist against one group of, or the other for whatever reason, but really what a racist to me is someone who is concerned about the betterment of their own people, right? It's not a problem when black people do it. It's a problem when white people do it though, you
Mhm.
know? And again, it becomes a problem when the two groups or group, whatever groups start getting pitted one against the other, right? If the black community has this base and feels like, well, we know what we need to do to better our community, and this is what we're going to do, this is what we believe in, we want black owned businesses to be supported. There's nothing wrong with saying any of that, right?
Mhm.
Fine. But when you have the same thing on the other side, it shouldn't also then be denigrated because you're just shitting on the other side as well,
Yeah.
right?
And I mean, I also call it the bigotry of low expectations
Hmm.
because when you have things like affirmative action and stuff, what you're essentially telling black people is you're telling them, look, on your own merits, there was no way you could have gotten here.
Hmm.
So we lowered the standards and we got you and just put you in here.
Right,
And
exactly. And
and to,
it
yeah,
uh,
and I also believe it's also sort of in a way a white supremacy thing because essentially what you have is a black people that are essentially begging white people in order to let them into the colleges.
right. Well, it's absolutely tied in with the conversation about slavery and racism, right? Because what happens is we have told generations, generations of black people that your history begins and ends with slavery.
Mhm.
Slavery ended in 1865.
Mhm.
Okay, so a lot of these
Well,
these
can I correct that a bit?
well, slavery in America for black people ended in 1865. Slavery
Well,
still
wait.
exists today.
Well,
It's
no, I
still
mean, what I'm
happening,
talking about
absolutely.
is that the amendment actually didn't make slavery illegal. It just made it plantation slavery illegal. It still exists in the prison system.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. I'm right there with you. But
Mhm.
again, ever since we're talking about over 100, make me do math, over 150 years that we've been telling these black children that all you ever were slaves, right? And so now I don't know if you know about the ADOS movement or the I think it's FBA. So American Descendants of Slavery is the ADOS movement, and then FBA I think is like Fundamental Black American, whatever. These are people who are trying to claim that Well, ADOS, obviously, they claim that they are, we were the descendants of slaves. This is all we ever were was slaves, right? And then you have this other group that says no. Well, some of us came from Africa, right? Because that's what the hell happened.
Yeah.
That education about Black history in Africa, and
Mhm.
this is one of the problems that I have with and I know it's funny. A lot of
Mhm.
people like to joke about it, the "we was kings" thing, right?
Mhm.
No, I get it, but it's actually fucking true. Like, Black people did have kings and queens, and when you deny them that education, then and all you do is then teach them that they were brought over here from Africa and all you ever were was slaves, then they will always have that slave mentality. And again, it just erodes the relations between white people and Black,
Mhm.
because you
And
you
yeah.
go ahead.
And yeah, and what people don't realize is that I like to challenge people. Can they name one policy against Black people in America that also didn't screw over poor white people in the process?
No, no, they
Yeah,
can't.
yeah, because I like to look at it this way. For one, slavery basically put many poor white people out of a job
Hmm.
because many business owners said, well, why am I going to hire white laborers when I can just have a Black slave?
Right. And that was the main reason for the Civil War. It's all about um um labor and financial income. Like,
Mm.
that's all it really is. It wasn't about, well, they're just Black, so I'm gonna own them.
Mm.
No, they bought cheap labor because that's what you had to do to be profitable when you had a large plantation, and
Mm.
you needed hands to work the land and you didn't
Mm.
have it. Well, here's this resource of people, and I can buy their labor for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
And it just made sense to a business person. I think a lot of these people weren't really racist. And again, we talk about it like it was so inherent, like it was just everywhere. No, it was not cheap to own slaves, right? There were a
Yeah.
handful, a very small, I think it was something like 10% of the American
It
public that actually owned slaves.
it ranged from state to state. Like
Yeah,
the the highest in any state was like 50%.
yeah,
And in many other states it could be as low as like you said, 10%.
right. But even during those times, you had free Blacks living in the other states that didn't experience this, you
Mhm.
know? And so, again, we're just lying to Black people. We're lying to them, telling them
Well,
that all you ever were was slaves, which is because it feeds that victim mentality, right? And
yeah.
it doesn't help anybody.
Well, yeah, and I point out this for a fact that people don't know is like a common point that's all talked about is they'll say, "Well, diversity is a great thing," and I say, "Well, you do realize slavery was one of the most diverse institutions that's ever been known to man."
You are so right about that. Oh my God.
Like literally, think about it. Every race of people, every skin color you can imagine, at some point in time, owned another one of them.
Yep. It's absolutely true.
Mm.
Absolutely true. Oh
Yeah,
man.
and I mean, so I just always found that sort of funny. It's like a reason why that they chose specifically Black people to bring over is because, like, literally, they said this in the secession documents. They said we brought them over here because they can withstand the heat better. Now, whether that's scientifically true or not is another matter, but they'll say Well, because black people can absorb heat, that makes them better for the cotton fields.
Oh my God, it's just such, it just feels so stupid to
Yeah.
hear that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And there's another myth that needs to be dispelled. Not all blacks that were in America were brought here.
Mhm.
Okay, we weren't all slaves. There were black people in the Americas before slavery ever made its way over to our shores.
Mhm.
You know, again, it's just this falsification of the actual history. And
Well,
there are books out there that you can get. They're ridiculously expensive because they don't want you to have the information.
yeah, and I mean, what people don't realize is that they'll say, "Well, the South didn't care about diversity," and I'm like, you do realize in the South, the only rule in when it comes to having slaves, you had to be freed.
Yeah,
That was it. Like,
yeah.
and so in the South, you had white people owning black slaves, you had Indians owning black slaves, and you had black people owning black slaves.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And a lot of times when it's especially in history time, like in many liberal historians, they'll try to paint black people owning the slaves in the most. They say, "Oh, well, they just bought family members back," and and they might say, "Well, yeah, I'm sure some of them did it for business reasons as well." But I mean, people don't realize this is that the slave owning mentality of everyone was just ridiculous back then. And what people fail to realize is that black people were enslaving other black people in Africa long before white people came into being.
Hmm.
And
Absolutely.
what happened was is that black people simply when they a lot of black slaves they didn't hate the institution of slavery so much. They hated that they were the slaves.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah.
So if they could get out of slavery and enslave other people, oh, they were fine with the system. They just hated
Yeah,
that they were the slaves.
exactly. And I think that's the same kind of attitude that you see in a lot of these a lot of the black the ADOS blacks today, right? It's like, the reparations conversation is one that I don't know. I'm not gonna step my toes into that pool because it's just too deep right now.
Well, it might.
Um,
I wonder how that would work with you. Would your one side of your family have to give money to your other side of the family?
I don't know. I'll take a half a check. I don't know.
Yeah,
Does one half cancel out the other half a check?
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know.
yeah. I remember what's funny is like I remember a lot of people liberals would tell me, "Well, your family were slave owners that benefited off the you know that have benefited off the labor of black people," and I'm like, I'm a second generation immigrant from Germany. Literally, most of my family wasn't around America for most of the time that slavery was in America.
Yeah, and it's the dumbification of
Mm.
society, right? Like we are just dumbing people down. They don't know basic history. They don't know. They can't even stop themselves. They have no like no restraint. They can't stop themselves to think, hey, maybe wait a minute. Maybe I should think about what this person is saying. Maybe I should check my timeline. Maybe I should check my information. No, it's just an immediate knee-jerk reaction. And I think that's one of the cons of social media.
Mhm.
It's just a constant need for that instant gratification, right? So it doesn't matter what you say if you're right or wrong. You just got to get your feeling out there. And
I actually made a funny joke with a liberal that because I like trolling them as well. I troll conservatives as well, but liberals are funner because they take it more seriously.
Yes, they do.
And what's funny is like one person seriously asked me, "When's the last?" Because we were talking about the Confederates, and the person said, "When's the last time you know that we've had monuments to people that killed Americans and lost a war?" And I said, "The Indians." No response.
Ooh, yeah, they may have nuts for you on that one.
Yeah, because I mean,
Yeah,
seriously, the Indians were slave owners, and they killed. I mean, they killed, and it wasn't all defensive either. There was many cases where it was offensive, where they took the fight to the white people, and I'm saying, and they lost a war, and I'm saying, really, me, and I've said to many Indians, the only reason why you're mad is because you lost. That's really it.
everybody's mad when you on the losing side.
Yeah,
But no, it's again, it's absolutely true. The Indians were just as fucking savage as people like to claim that the white people were when they came over. No, they came and they won a war. Like, I'm sorry, your side didn't have enough to fucking beat these guys, but it
it
was.
happened.
You know what I mean? Yeah, you know what I mean? And like, stop it, because they did this to their own. Well, their own.
I remember what's funny
Tribes
about it
killed
is,
tribes. Like, different native tribes killed other native tribes. It's nothing new. They
yeah,
knew what war was before the white man came down and landed on Plymouth Rock.
yeah,
Man, miss me with that.
yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's like, you know, I'm saying, white people are living on stolen land. I said, all land is stolen because we can trace everything back to that time when a caveman hit another caveman over the head with a club and took his cave.
Right.
I mean, that's basically what humans have been doing since humans have been around.
Right.
And it's not saying that that's a good or bad thing. It's reality.
Well,
Um,
listen, property transfers ownership all the time. When someone dies, their property becomes either property of the state or property that now belongs to their children. And that's the passive way to go about it. And then there are people who go out and take what they want and get away with it. You
and
know, I-
you know, and what I always found funny about it is like people like for example, if trying to blame a child for the fact that, let's say, their father was a serial killer, we would honestly know that that's horrible to do, to blame a child for what their father did. However, we have no problem about blaming a white person today for something that their great 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 grandfather did.
yeah, may have done.
Well, I mean, even if you know that they did it, like if you have the records to show that there was a direct lineage, and I'm saying, how stupid is that to blame someone, like not just to blame someone for because you would think it's awful to blame a child for what their father did, but
Yeah.
somehow it's not also stupid to blame them for what their great 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 grandfather did.
Yeah, exactly. Look, even the Hatfields and McCoys, they gave that shit up after a while, right?
Yeah.
But no.
I mean, they originally said, look, we're not losing any more people over this.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the entire thing in their situation happened over a pig that got stolen.
Yeah, oh man, yeah, I fell asleep while watching it, but I started watching there was a series, like a four-part series on the Hatfields and McCoys. And really good.
And I remember what's funny about it is like feminists always have a way of telling half of the story of anything.
Yeah.
It's an amazingly uncanny ability to do that. Like for example, they'll bring up how scientists really didn't know anything about the female body because they tested on men. And, and they'll say, for example, the vibrator was come about because there was a way of treating women for hysteria. And
Oh
I'm like,
yeah.
and I said, you do realize that the reason why scientists tested on men more than women is for the same reason we test on rats more than we do people.
They're
It's because men
dispensable.
are more disposable.
Exactly.
So I mean, that's why they do it.
Hmm.
And and I mean, let's think about it this way: the reason why the vibrator became for like women is because it's not because it's like, oh, these doctors hated women or these men hated women. No, they noticed a problem with women and they tried to solve it. Granted, in a way that wasn't, accurate. Although I'm sure many women were pleased by the treatment. But I mean, it wasn't because they hated women. It was because they were trying to find something to help women.
Right. So they can
And
shut the hell
I
up.
find it funny, like they'll always put, like I've said, this is like funny. It's where like feminists will talk about like in ancient times about witch burnings and how women were uniquely targeted for that. And I said they never ask why. And note the reason why is in majority of cases
Mm.
it was because other women accused other women of being a witch.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of
I mean, basically
course.
what happened is this is the typical example. A woman got pissed off at a like a person that let's say at church that wronged her in some way. And so what she did is she accused her friend of being a witch and had put a spell or something on her that was causing her immense pain. Men being, once men hear, oh, woman in danger, they instantly want to say, all right, we have to do something about this.
Yeah.
And that's the witch burnings. So I said, moral of the story, women are petty, men are simps.
It's the downfall of humanity right there, man.
Yeah.
One sentence is so true.
Yeah, I said, the moral of the story is women are petty, men are simps. There's so many, like, and what's funny is, like, they'll use cultures like the ancient Greece, and they'll say, we'll look at all these, like, for Aristotle, they'll say, like, Aristotle said, and he did say it, that women were essentially defective men. And I'm like, you do realize all the stuff he said about poor men as well, right? Like, Aristotle was an elitist academic. He didn't have really many good things to say about many groups of people. And so, I mean, using him as like, oh, well, you know, and for one, they'll use Aristotle and say, oh, well, that was the common attitude amongst all men back then. And they'll say, oh, men had all these educational opportunities. I'm like, for the vast majority of human history, 99% of people did not have the education.
Right. And you have to understand that with education comes a cost. You had to be able to afford a higher education. And not many men had that ability. So, oh God.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people don't realize, and like, well, you have to remember, Lauren, if it wasn't for feminism, women would never be out working.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
They would have just been on the couch having babies, and, they would not have been allowed to work.
No woman ever had a job before the term feminism was coined. And that's a
Which,
provable fact.
which is stupid, in my opinion. It's, for one, you can read the Bible and it talks about women generals, and it also talks about like the ideal woman is someone that's carrying the grains and who weaves and stuff like that. Like, so even like, here's what's funny: it's not that women did not have jobs back then; it's that they had to have jobs back then.
Right. You had to be useful. You couldn't be just a an oxygen breather. You can just, sit around and do nothing. You had to be useful back then. This was before there was any kind of infrastructure or any kind of industrialization. You had to The food that you had to eat, you had to go out and get. And if you didn't have it, well, you're just starving until you actually go out and get something to eat and then come back and cook and prepare. Um,
Yeah. And I mean, like those, we all, we have plenty of examples of women, you know, a task that women did in many cultures is they weaved and made fabrics. And some women could get more money than their husbands doing that. And there were like a lot of the time, the reason I mean, what people don't realize is that they'll say, well, there was this division of labor, and I'm saying a lot of the reasons why that was is not because men hated women. It was because you're dealing in a time when life objectively sucked and things were much more dangerous. And you're
Actively
thinking,
trying to kill
well,
you.
how am I going to keep my tribe alive? If
Right.
I have my wife do all these dangerous jobs and she dies, and enough women die, well, we're screwed.
Yeah.
If I and my male friends do it, and let's say half of us die doing it, well, we can still rebuild our community. It'll be difficult, but we can do it. So, I mean, people don't realize that is like male disposability.
Yeah. It's everywhere. Back in those times, the the majority of your day was spent gathering food, right? So the men were sent out to protect and to provide for the rest of their tribe. That was their job. So women had the time to, do things like learn how to weave baskets, to earn money and learn how to trade off of the backs of the men who were going out and providing for them
Mhm.
and their families. And it's I don't understand why. Well, I do understand why, but it's not something that should be looked down upon because it's something that's still true to this day. When a woman is looking for a husband, she wants a man that's going to provide for her,
Yeah.
right? So most of his time and his energy is going to be spent trying to procure resources for her and
Mhm.
their children, their family.
Yeah, and I mean, this is what I've always found funny is like I think, I know men probably do this as well, but a thing that sort of always makes me sort of think is like when women will say, well, us women, we all do this with each other. So, and men and women are exactly alike. So, therefore, men have to have done this as well. And that's not right. Like, for example, whenever a woman says men are dogs, I say the only reason why you say that is because you only recognize the existence of 10% of men. Those
Is it
10% of men, yeah, they are dogs because they're the millionaires, they're the playboys that have the resources and money to have as many women as they want.
right? He's just a dog because he don't want you. He's a dog because he won't marry you. That's why he's a dog. And that's
Yeah.
the way they think, you know.
And what's funny is they'll talk about, you know, slut shaming. And I'm saying, you do, like, but feminists will say that's an example of misogyny. And I said, you do realize that women slut shame other women more than men slut shame women.
Oh, absolutely. Men love sluts because that
Yeah,
means that they might have a chance.
yeah.
You know what I
I mean,
mean?
I think about this. Why would men have a problem with sluts?
Right.
Yeah. I
No,
mean, well, here's the thing that's funny about it. It's like actually evolutionary psychology. Men don't want like their sister or their daughter to be a slut, but they don't mind other people's daughters and stuff being sluts.
well, yeah.
Yeah. And it's actually more evolved for women to be like that. But because let's think about it this way: if a big thing that you have to offer your tribe is your reproductive capabilities or having children, and you want to get resources and stuff, if you have a person that is just giving away the sex for cheap, then that sort of devalues your labor. That's how it was seen.
Hmm.
And so women would shame, like would get in groups and shame sluts and trying to get guys to not go with them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's sort of what's fun. I always find it funny is because they'll say, well, society is just a bunch of men trying to control women's bodies. I mean, I said, look up the history of bachelors, and you'll notice that it's filled with men being shamed for not getting married.
Hmm.
And what's funny is like that people don't realize also is that lesbians were not dealt with nearly as harshly as gay men were.
Oh, yeah. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. And here's what's the difference between the two, that how they were treated. Lesbians were either denied an exit that they existed, or two, they were accepted that they existed, but that they were just immature women. They needed to get a husband that would teach them the ways of a man. And that would be what they would do. But if a man was gay and he did that, oh, kill him.
Well, I think there were a lot of lesbians in the feminist movement in like the 60s, right? That's when you saw like the short butch haircuts, and they just stopped caring about how they looked. And I think that's what a lot of I guess I would call them political lesbians, because I think what happens is they just some of these women just get so disenfranchised with men. They just get so down on men that they're like, I don't need a man. I don't need a man. Well, I'm just going to date a woman. And it's not really because there's a genuine attraction to a woman. It's just that they hate men so much that, I know that it exists. As to what like percentage, I couldn't really say, but absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, gay men were absolutely bashed because again, anything men do, it just it can't be seen in a positive light.
Well, I mean, the reason why, it's like that, in my opinion, is because, sex is a way of getting someone to bond with someone else. And because, I mean, even the Greeks realized this, where they actually encouraged their men in their army to have sex with each other.
Mm,
Because the idea was, well, if you're sleeping with this guy, you're going to be willing to die for him.
yeah.
And well, let's think about it this way: if a man is, only sleeps with other men, that means he's not going to be willing to die for a woman. And that's where I think society's getting at with it. He's basically being punished for not providing for a woman.
Yeah, that's that's the gist of it, right? That's exactly what we've been doing to men for the longest. And it's just, any way they can find to exploit that, that's what they're gonna do.
Mhm. And you know, and what's funny is about it is that people will. Another common issue that gets brought up is pornography, and like a common thing we'll talk about is how it degrades women. And and what's funny is I'm saying also about it is like it gives men unrealistic expectations and standards. And I said this, the problem isn't that men have unrealistic expectations. That's not the problem for the women. It's that men are getting standards, period.
Yeah, exactly. You're not allowed to have a preference now, friend. I don't know who gave you that idea. You're
Yeah,
just
well, I
supposed
mean,
to
it's sort
sit
of like
back and
this. It's like if I've noticed this is that the higher value a woman is, the less she cares about the porn thing.
mhm,
But if you're an extremely low value woman where the only thing you can offer a man is literally sexual pleasure, then yeah, you're going to feel threatened by pornography because you literally can't offer anything else
yeah.
but sexual pleasure. Now, women
Yeah,
that are higher value say, oh, yeah, I can give my man sexual pleasure. I can also provide for him, be a good caretaker for his children, and I can do all these numerous other things for him. I don't just have to rely on the sex part.
yeah. Those and that's the distinction, right? It's women who have something more to offer than just their parts, right? Their body parts. Um, and you find it in quote unquote high value women as well as low value women. It's more of a mindset and how you feel about yourself, what your self esteem level is, right? Like I it's kind of hard for me to identify with because I just don't relate to these women and how they think. It's you know, it's just weird for me. Um, but I like to think that I have something more to offer than just my existence, and but that's not what we place the importance.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's sad. It's sad.
And
But
I mean, what's funny about it is that I'll say, well, it obviously, like, they'll say, well, pornography, has men dominating women. I'm like, you do realize porn is like a buffet table.
it's whatever you want, you can find it.
And then I'm like, it's like these people don't realize that there's plenty of men that are into the reverse.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, what's funny is like people don't realize this way. How is it men objectifying women really when they are literally sometimes paying like thousands of dollars for this stuff on women that they don't know, that probably don't even care about them. They care about their money,
Hmm.
but they don't care about them. And I find it like, I was saying, well, think about it this way. If a man buying porn is objectifying women because it's seeing her as a sex object, then I mean, wouldn't it equally be true that the porn star is treating the man like an ATM,
Absolutely.
and that's
Absolutely.
objectifying him?
Right. Right. But she earned that, you see. So she deserves his money. Any kind of resources that she can suck out of a man is perfectly fine because she earned it. Ugh.
I mean, to me,
Look,
it's actually a bit worse for men now than it was like 200 years ago in some ways, like because Back in 200 to 300 years ago, a man being willing to die for his woman, that was something that was taken as to be ultimately, you know, something to be honored, something to be cherished, something that we should view a man good for being willing to put themselves that much on the line.
Hmm.
Nowadays, it's more like a reparations thing where women say,
Yeah.
oh, women are not saying, like back then, they were saying, I'm going to honor you because you're willing to do that for me. Now they're saying, yeah, you're going to do that for me. You owe me.
Yeah. Just because I showed up,
Yeah.
you owe me because I spent time with you. And it's like the man's time and effort and energy is just worth absolutely nothing. I'm,
But
the
don't
attitudes
you
of
know
these young women.
that men believe they're entitled to sex?
I'm sorry, say that again.
I'm saying, don't you know that men feel like they're entitled to sex? I'm like,
Well,
do you realize if a man felt entitled to sex, he wouldn't ask women out.
yeah,
He wouldn't go out of his way to look presentable. He wouldn't go out of his way to have money, to have stuff to offer women if he believed he was just entitled to sex.
if he felt like he was just entitled to it, he would just take it. And that we call rape, my friends. And
Yeah,
that's not what most men do. I'm sorry, if he felt like he was entitled to sex, well, you feel like you're entitled to his open wallet at
yeah,
your whim. Look, at some point, there's got to be a quid pro quo here, Charlene and
yeah,
or Clarice, and you know, look, if you should, when you spend time with someone, it should be a mutually beneficial thing, right? You just want to
yeah,
go out and talk to this person. You're enjoying his time. He's enjoying your time. You share a meal, whatever. If he decides to pay for it, okay. I I believe that women should be stepping up more and
yeah,
offering at least at some once in a while to pay for half
yeah,
of the date. But if a woman's not willing to do that, then she's telling you right then and there that she doesn't feel like your time is as valuable as hers.
yeah,
And that's not a person that you should be investing much more time,
yeah,
because time is money, right? Money is time.
yeah.
You shouldn't be investing any more time and or money into that person, but it's expected from men.
And and also, like I was saying, is that they call like they'll also say something like this. Well, a man can get a thousand, like in his lifetime, can get thousands of women pregnant, whereas a woman can only have so many children. For one, it's a true biologically, all men have the potential to have a harem. The reality of it though is like 99.9999% of men are not going to have a harem.
Right.
The 0.1% of men that are going to have the harem are guys like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, or any of the numerous NFL and NBA athletes. They're going to
Right.
have harems. Mike, the Burger King flipper, the burger flipper, he's not having a harem.
No. No way. No way. And you know, it's oh my god. It's so interesting to watch these things play out, right? Because
Mm,
in the NFL, you've seen plenty of athletes. I can't remember the guy's name. I think it's Antonio something. Man's got like 13 different kids from 13 different baby mamas. Your NFL contract is only going to last you for so long, right? That money is going to run out.
mm,
You're not earning enough money to have this harem.
mm,
But because he has the status, he's got the paycheck, he's got he's famous, women will flock to him.
mm,
And I guess nobody taught him, but I know this to be a fact. There are people who will come in and coach you in all like sports teams. They'll
Mhm.
tell you about these gold digging women and how to protect yourself against them because they're just coming to get your nice new fresh paycheck, right? Some of these guys just don't listen. They're dick fingers. they don't
Yeah.
they're not using proper sense, right? Um, but then you look at something like Elon Musk. Elon Musk could have 15 baby moms. You know what I mean? He can have a plethora of baby mamas, but he doesn't.
Mhm.
He's got the one chick, right? I don't think he has any other kids besides the one.
Yeah, well, at least as much as we know about.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey,
But
but know what I joke about people with? I say, how about how come we don't recognize that Elon Musk is technically the richest African American?
he don't have the complexion for the protection, my friend. It's reverse white privilege. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? He doesn't have it no more. You can't claim to be African and have white skin, man. It just they won't accept it. I think their brains fry at the
I mean,
at the thought.
I've joked with people online, and I said, "What's the difference between Tyler Perry and Elon Musk?" Elon Musk was actually born in Africa.
A lot more differences than that, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, yeah.
And I always just found it funny. Is like I remember watching Larry Elder. He brought this up. He actually said he hated the term African American
Hmm.
because he'll say this: "My people have lived longer in this country. Like my ancestors have lived longer in this country than many white people do."
Hmm.
And like, for example, for me, I'm a second generation immigrant. My mother was German, born in Germany, and on my dad's side, like I'm like fourth generation immigrant because his like I believe great grandmother was in Puerto Rico before Puerto Rico became part of the United States.
Oh wow.
So I'm like, I'm not even like my family is not even really connected to this country
Yeah.
for most of its history. And so, I mean, it's so, and but yet I'm called an American, even though I've been here less, like for less time than many black people have been here,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I've
And
always
again,
thought was funny.
like I said, it goes back to this whole misinformation campaign uh when it comes to racism and the actual history, because if we were actually taught
Mhm.
about our history, we wouldn't be trying to claim that there wouldn't be such a term as African American. It would be one or the other, or there would be something more ah, more appropriate,
Yeah.
right? Because we just didn't all come here the same way. And then
Mhm.
you have to take into account the people who have immigrated from Africa after slavery was a thing.
Mhm.
They actually have, the naturalized citizens. They're
Mhm.
Americans. Are you calling them African because they just became an American? And I don't understand the need to hyphenate because if you go to France, you don't hear them calling anybody. Well, he's an African. What the fuck? He's an African French person, or this is a Chinese Italian. They
Mhm.
don't say that in these other countries. It's only in America, and it's the weirdest phenomenon. But it's like you have to attach this other identity on top of being American to feel like you belong. Because the last time I heard, we were all supposed to be. it's a melting pot, right? Like we're all supposed to be here. It's a great experiment. Like we're all supposed to just be able to come and be here, and we're all just American. It's more of a belief system rather than well, I guess America does kind of have its own cultural
Mhm.
identity. It's not a very good one,
Yeah.
but you can't just a group of Americans doesn't just move to a country in Africa and say, "Well, I'm not learning the language. Um, we're just all gonna live right here and just take over this town, and we're just the American Africans."
Mhm.
What?
Mhm.
It doesn't work the other way. I'm sorry, I'm going on for too long.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, I also believe it's just, people often don't take into account how little, what's funny is like I'm also known for my talks on abortion. And a common response that feminists will always give to me about that is they'll say, well, if you don't like women having an abortion, get a vasectomy. And I'm like, there's so many problems with that that it's hard to list. For
Yeah.
one, vasectomy is like a condom. It's preventative, not terminative.
Mhm.
Two, vasectomies can fail. A failed abortion results in a live child sometimes. And another thing is that, I mean, why should a man have to go out of his way in order to make sure a woman does not do something immoral?
Exactly. Especially when women have we're in the teens. I think it's like 17 different forms of birth control. There's so many different ways that a woman can prevent herself from falling pregnant. Um,
And I mean, well, here's the thing: it's that I mean, I basically said this: the difference between men and women is that women basically have the right to be a deadbeat.
mhm.
Men don't.
No.
Because
Yeah,
think
no.
about it this way: a woman can, you know, she has the three A's that she can do legally. She can abort, give it up for adoption, or abandon it.
Mhm.
She has those three options, and she can do all of them without any social ostracization for it.
Exactly. And then look at what we do with irresponsible women who have children. We put them
Mhm.
on television and call them, "Oh, look at these teen moms. Look at all these teen moms, these irresponsible young women who look." Now, the first one, I think everybody should get a mulligan, right? Your first one, if you're young and you're just stupid and you don't know how your body works, okay, it's not exactly an excuse, but I guess everybody can kind of understand that, mistakes happen. After the first one, all bets are off. You know what gets you pregnant. You know what you can do to not get pregnant. And if you choose to not do any of those things, then it's your responsibility. And it's it should never be placed 100% solely on the man because unless he's raping her,
Yeah.
like one of these threads that have been going on with Hannah for the past couple of months is still these people going on about how it's all the man's fault and he should determine where he leaves his splooge and it's his responsibility. If he didn't want to be a parent, then he should be more mindful of where he leaves his seed. Nothing at all, just no agency at all on the parts of these women. There's just no, acknowledgement that they have a role to play.
Mhm.
And eh, I just feel bad because eventually some of these women are going to have kids.
Mhm.
and their fathers, who knows what kind of situation that's going to be. But God,
I've actually made this is a good way if you ever want to get feminists on Twitter mad. I've said this: women, if you want to, and I've told this to even pro-life people, we need to do that. I've told this: if you want to reduce the abortion rate, tell women stop fucking with rednecks and thugs. Just stop. Put the dick down. Do not go for the rednecks and thugs. Who would have ever thought Jamal, the cocaine dealer, was not fatherly material?
exactly.
Whoever thought Billy the meth addict was not fatherly material?
Right. You got a problem with deadbeat dads? Well, then, ladies, you need to stop fucking deadbeats.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple, and women, like, what we always say: women are the gatekeepers of sex, men are the gatekeepers of relationships, right? Well, with the gatekeeping of the sex also comes the gatekeeping of the childbirth. So there's a lot more, men need to be a lot more vigilant when they're vetting these women, because just because she'll let you have sex doesn't mean she's going to let you walk away when now there's a child involved, you know, and not let you walk away. But, you know, if she can find you, even if you're not her father, or the child's father, if she knows where you live, she knows what your name is, she can petition the court to put you on child support, and you can be stuck with a child that's not yours. The women have all of the power in that situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, even some lawyers that are men's rights activists have noticed that basically men have as much father rights as the woman says he does.
Exactly.
If a woman says, "Oh, you have fatherly rights, you can take the child, you can have it," then he has all those rights. However, if the woman's vindictive, then no, he has no rights functionally.
Nothing. Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, and I've actually, people have said, well, we do the child support and that the motherly custody because it's of the best of interest to the child. And I'm like, no, the reason why the government did it is because it's for the best of the government.
Exactly. And the argument is that they don't want wards of the state, right? So to prevent the government from having to pay for these children that, the mother can't afford, then they're going to then force the father to pay on the threat of, jail time or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But what they also don't tell you is that the government also gets a kickback for every man they put on the child support system. So they're getting a kickback in multiple ways, right? They're getting let off from having to assist these women. And I swear to you, if they would get out of this, if the government would get the hell out of this, get these women off of welfare, you wouldn't have so many illegitimate children, because women would then realize that, oh, nobody's going to come in and swoop in and save me from this debt that I've incurred. Because as much as, yes, it's a child, it's a beautiful baby, blah, 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 it's still a debt. You're incurring a debt. And to not think of it that way is irresponsible, because you're gonna have to pay for something for that child. God forbid you don't have a child that has medical necessities, you know? But they just don't think about it that way. They just, well, he got me pregnant, so he's got to pay. If he's not going to pay, then somebody's got to pay for these kids. And it ends up being the government, which is not even the government. It's the rest of us, the fucking taxpayer.
Well, I've also joked about it too, as well as like the reason why, because I think you already know this, but before it became default maternity, it was default paternity, where the man had default custody over the children. I mean, well, really, the principle was whoever had the most money and resources got the child,
Right.
and that was 99% of the 90% of the time that was the man that got would get the child from that. And as wrong as that system was, and I believe it so, because it deprived women of their children, for one, but for as long as that went, you had less government intervention in that.
Hmm.
The reason why the government changed it to default motherhood is because they know that women will be more reliant on the state. And if women are more reliable on the state, that justifies them getting more involved and getting more power.
Hmm. Exactly.
Mhm,
Exactly.
mhm. And people often don't think about, um, why, for example, things like marriage came about. I've said, I didn't think about this until recently, but I personally see marriage as it's one of the first instances of what they call it, trying to deal with an inequality in in parental intimacy. Um, because women do not need marriage to feel an intimate bond with their children. They have the most connected bond you can possibly have for 9 months. Men don't have that. So, in order to deal with that inequality of intimacy, we create a system that rewards men for being committed. And that's sort of how it came down to. It was about not about enslaving women to men. It was about making sure that you have both parents that are committed to a child.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how it all came about. It was a way of dealing with that inequality of bonding. And nowadays, we just completely remove the man from the equation, except for maybe his check.
Exactly. Not maybe. That's the number one goal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
no longer about the benefit of the child when all you reduce that to is a dollar sign.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's completely arbitrary, the dollar amounts that they ascribe to what they deem to be the best interest of the child. So if you're a high earning man, but now a year later you're no longer earning that same type of money, they don't care. They still want you to provide that certain amount of money when it doesn't take differing levels of money. Just because I'm an NBA player or a musician or whatever, and I earn billions of dollars a year, that doesn't mean it takes $1 million per year to raise the kid. So I think there's standards that need to be set. There really needs to be like something set in stone that the basic needs of a child should be this, and this is what it's going to cost, and this is how much each parent should be providing.
Mm-hmm.
And like what they use as arguments is that, well, I'm a high earner, my child, I'm used to this type of lifestyle, so my child has to have this type of lifestyle. That should be thrown right the fuck off the books.
Well, I mean, I remember Chris Rock actually made a funny joke about that. He said that's like me going up to a a steak restaurant, and saying, "Well, I've been coming here for 10 years. I have the expectation of a steak, and I'm not
Mhm.
coming back here. So you just need to give me a steak anyway."
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I've said marriage shouldn't even be considered a contract anymore because it's not really a contract because In any other contract, there's actually a penalty for the person that chooses to leave the contract.
Mm-hmm.
In no other contract can the person that walks out on the contract actually get more benefits than if they
Exactly.
stayed in it.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
I've said this, imagine this. Imagine, let's say you hire a guy to build your house and he quits halfway through building the house, and you're outraged and you want to take him to, and he takes you to court over it, the fact that he's not building the house. And now, not just do you not have the house, but now you also have to, like, it'd be like saying, oh, well, you don't just not have your house, you also have to pay for not just the labor he did, but you also have to pay for the continued labor that he'll be doing later on in life.
Right.
And I'm saying, if that was how contracts were dealt, like, really, you would see tons of more fraud. I mean, there
Absolutely.
usually is always a penalty for someone that is leaving the contract.
Yeah, but when you have 80% of, or what is it, 75 to 80% of women who are the initiators of the divorce, again, of course, you're not going to penalize the women, are you? So it's just all biased, and
They'll
I
say, but don't you know that comes from abuse? And I'm like, for one, I mean, let's just say, for example, let's just say, for the sake of argument, it was abuse. How does that have any relation to the marriage?
right,
I mean, it's illegal to beat someone, regardless if they're your wife or not.
right. If you're abused, you call the cops, and that's a civil matter. The cops will deal with that, right? And police.
Yeah,
You adjudicate that in through the court system.
I mean, that has
That
nothing to do with marriage in of itself.
No, no, it doesn't. And you know, th- again, these women, they just, well, they want to get every last dime that they can get, and it's all financial. It's always a financial thing, right? If any petty argument that they have, it comes down to, well, you owe me for this because I feel like you hurt me, or I feel like you did me wrong, and it's just, it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's just amazing about how that sort of stuff plays out and how the courts allow it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah, and I just think it's. I mean, another thing is, like, people will say that, well, we have these stats on rape, and men make up the majority of rapists. And I'm like, you do realize, for the majority of American history, rape was defined in a way that women could not be rapists, for one. And
Mhm.
it was specifically named as an act only a man can do to a woman.
Right.
So, yeah, who would have ever thought, if you define something as narrow it down like that? But yeah, if you define men as the perpetrator, oh, then you have more male perpetrators. I'm like,
Mhm.
I mean, that's like saying this. That would be like me defining robbery as a black guy breaks into a house and steals your TV. Well, obvious, like, they say, oh, and black people make up 90% of the robbers, and I'm like, you've defined the the parameters in such a way to have that result.
Right.
So how is it a surprise? And I mean, so I pointed out that we'll bring up, like, it's brought up about marital rape, and I'm like, for the vast majority of history, marital rape was seen as an oxymoron,
Mhm.
because the idea was that marriage is a contract, and once a man or woman is in the contract, they are required to do things for each other. Sex being one of them, and that's not something that just men had to do for women.
Hmm.
Um, Women were also entitled to sex from their husbands. And in fact, we know about plenty of times when women could get their men excommunicated from church for not sleeping with them.
Wow. Again, it's the power that women have. They don't even realize. They take it for granted.
Mhm. So I mean, through most of human history, like for history, so I like to point this out. For most of human history, rape has been defined as something that can only occur to a woman.
Hmm.
And for men, it doesn't matter if they are married or not, they still can't be raped.
Yeah, that's
That
still true today in the UK. That's one of the countries that I know that still does not recognize, you know, female rapists
in
as
Saudi
actual
Arabia,
rapists.
I think too. Muslim
Yeah.
in general. So I mean, it's they're gonna say, oh well, that means we live in a patriarchy. I mean, that's what gets me is like, if we lived in a patriarchy that existed to benefit men at the expense of women, you would think it would be the reverse.
Well, if we lived in a patriarchy, you wouldn't hear anybody complaining about rape because they would dismiss it. Oh, what do you mean? A man assaulted you? They would not even see that as a legitimate thing if we lived in an actual patriarchy. If we're talking about men that are supposedly feel entitled to sex, then you'd never hear that rape wouldn't even be a thing.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, if it was also like that, I mean, we would think it would be the opposite, where rape would be defined in a way that it could only be done by women to men, but not the reverse.
Right.
But
Right.
we don't live in that world, and uh,
No.
and so I mean, and it's always just it's silly about how much they go out of their way to show that, you know, how men were holding women back from voting. I mean, for most of human history, most men and most women could not vote.
Yeah.
And the gap between men and women voting in America, the longest is like 40 years,
Yeah.
and the shortest is like 2 years.
Yeah.
That's a
Because there
tremendous
were.
gap.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And the thing is that, and the reason why that was the way it was set up is not because men hated women. It was because voting was seen as a military benefit.
Hmm.
You were willing to sacrifice your life for your country, or you were contributing a net benefit in form of taxes or whatever to the government. You had more skin in the game, as you could say,
Right.
and you got the benefit of that in the form of voting. And and the thing is that people don't like to hear this, but the vast majority of women either did not care about having the right to vote or were against it.
Hmm.
Because to many women, they thought having the right to vote was superfluous because their husbands already had the expectations of voting in line with the family's interest. And the
Hmm.
family's interest was the woman's interest.
Yeah.
So so many women would say, well, why do I need the right to vote? My man's going to vote accordingly to how I am.
right,
Oh,
to
yeah.
what they wanted. It was unnecessary, and that's kind of what
Mhm.
the problem was with giving women the right to vote, because it a lot of times it would just negate the actual household vote, because
Yeah.
you'd have the husband voting one way, the wife, she's staunch in her opinions and she wants to vote the other way, and
Well,
it cancels each other out.
yeah, and another thing that I've also found, and this will be the last thing I would mention, but what people fail to realize is that under our current system, it would be very well possible for a dictator to like a like a war hog president to come in who wants a war, to come in. He gets little support from men, but a mass majority of support from women. And women will have, since they have the majority vote, they can overrule the men and have this war hog president. And this war hog president can institute a conscription on the men who did not vote for him.
Hmm. Exactly. Meanwhile, the women just sit back and they don't have to lift a finger. They're just fine. They just voted in this war hawk, and now all their men get sent off to die. You know
Yeah, and while the men are sent out to die, they get to run factories and stuff because the men are dying and can't take the jobs.
exactly, exactly. And
Yeah,
then they'll complain about having to do so much work, and it's just a never ending stream of complaints. If something that needs to be done. Well, this is I need to wash the dishes better. So men made dishwashers, and and
I've
just
said this
again,
is like if feminism never existed, women would have gotten the right to vote because technological advancement gave women more time to focus on politics than they've ever had to before in history.
yeah,
So even if feminism never came about, women would have still gotten more involved in politics simply out of boredom.
yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. I think that definitely would have happened. Even by the law of averages. Because you women did have the ability to work. Eventually some of them would have gotten into the political scene, and all of these things could have corrected themselves.
Yeah,
But no, we gave the deference to women, and now we
they
just
gendered an
spend.
issue that didn't need to be gendered in the first
Hmm.
place.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know you're tired. We've been going on for 2 hours. It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good talking to you too. I'm sorry. Sorry, it's late
Oh,
for
it's fine. I
me.
know you don't have 4 hours on you like Hannah. Yeah.
It's so listen, I love my girls, but sometimes it's so hard to get a word in edgewise, because just they just they go, they have so much to say, they have so much knowledge, and I'm really blessed to have these people as my friends.
Mhm.
Um, but it's just been an absolute blast working with these women and men for the past 4 years now. Well, longer than that, but for the most consistent basis, I think it's been about 4 years now. But no, I love this because I find value in it. I'm the type of person who believes in like truth and honesty, and if we can't be truthful and honest about what's going on, then we're never going to be able to have an honest discussion. And we're never going to be able to fix these things. These problems are just going to get worse. And, people are going to continue to just self delete. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see more women killing themselves. And I definitely don't want to see the amount of men who are out here killing themselves doing that, but I think the way that we do that is to reach out and just letting people know that, we're here to talk. We're here if you need a shoulder to cry on. And I think a lot more people would do well to know that they're not alone out here.
Yeah.
And so if anything that I get the I feel like I benefit because I'm able to help. I'm here to listen to people and talk to people. And if I can help you off, whatever soapbox you're on, or to help you figure something out, that makes my day. And so, yeah, I'm selfish. I want to help you because it makes me feel good.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's a good kind of selfish.
I'm
Um,
being silly. I'm being silly, but
yeah. I mean, so would you like to tell the audience where they can meet you and any upcoming projects you have?
Well, I am every Thursday. I'm at Honey Badger Radio. I'm live with Hannah and whomever else we have on as guests. I do collaborations with Dr. Randa McCam. We do songs together. Um, so we have another song coming out. I have to learn and memorize some lyrics, and so I'm going to be working on that this weekend. And those are always really great fun. He's just the man is brilliant, and he can just write some amazing lyrics. So yeah, we have another one that's in the works. Um, but outside of that, you can find me on Twitter at just Lauren B. And that's really where I'm at right now. I haven't moved to any other social platforms. I have to sign up with Gab again,
Mhm.
but I'm not really. I'm not about to jump on the True Social train just yet because I'm not
Yeah.
hearing too many good things about it. But
Well, I uploaded my talk with Hannah on Odyssey.
uh huh.
That's probably what I'm gonna end up doing here because I don't want to be booted by YouTube.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to tell everybody to go to Rumble and Odyssey and BitChute. Just it's so much better, if you are on YouTube, then stay there and just get the people who are following you to follow you to these other platforms. And get these eyeballs off of YouTube. Susan does not deserve your traffic at
When
all.
you're on YouTube, just talk about cats and talk about cats and meaningless political stuff for that. And when you get on Odyssey, oh, then feel free to make all the the edgy jokes that you want to make.
Right, right.
Mhm. Well, it was nice talking to you, Lauren. I would definitely love to do something like this again.
Absolutely. I am here. I'm always available. So,
Mhm.
let me know. And I'm definitely willing to come back on. This was
All right.
fun.
All right. Well, that is all for today. This is Mr. Brass from the Brass Exchange with Lauren B.